In this vast stadium, 60,000 brothers gathered together here in Sydney for the Give God Glory International Convention. 55,000 came from all over Australia. 5,000 were international visitors from Japan, the Philippines, the United States, Hawaii, islands of the Pacific, giving God glory by their presence, and how happy they were to be here together as brothers of a new world society. We truly are a brotherhood, an international family that has no national borders, here to express their faith and their confidence in Jehovah's promises, dedicated to doing God's will. Every day, 20,000 arrive by train, some of them in special trains organised by the rail authorities, moving orderly and quietly to the vast Olympic Stadium. During this 4-day convention, part of 30 throughout the world, the brothers will be taught why and how glorifying Jehovah should be a major force in their lives, and how it can enrich their life and of their families, and greatly contribute to their local communities. Scattered around the stadium are 400 to 500 buses, some from distant parts of Australia, travelling for many days and nights to the largest convention ever held.
An angel should tell us something contrary to the pattern of helpful words.
The Give God Glory convention was the result of 100 years of preaching the good news, started with just a mere handful at the turn of the century, and today over 60,000. Jehovah's blessing is on these good-hearted people. In the early years of the last century, the brothers were strong and courageous, preaching the good news in very trying and difficult circumstances. This vast country, the size of Europe or the United States, with at that time limited roads and its very harsh climate of summer heat, it made the ministry hard. A lot of the work was done on foot or bicycle. Perhaps a group might share an old car with a tent. And then along came the Depression. Very little money for food or clothes. In rural areas, they would sometimes exchange literature for vegetables. But the ministry continued. At the beginning of the Depression, the late 1920s, there were a meagre 450 brothers in the whole country. It was a time when everyone knew everybody. Torrington, Kelty, Bell, Bricknell, the Pusey sisters, Baxter, Tishon, Reeses, McGilvrays, Bradburn, Snyders, just to name a few of them. By 1938, the church's opposition to the preaching work was growing. There were instances of mob violence. Attempts to break up the meetings, like in other countries, was regularly occurring. Preaching work included stinging attacks on the clergy and their political friends. A brother who lived next door to a church erected a sign. The message was that religion is a snare and a racket. Exposure of the Catholic Church and its relations with Nazi Germany was not what they wanted to hear. An exciting event for the brothers was a visit by Brother Rutherford in 1938. Brother Rutherford boldly gave the talk entitled Freedom or Romanism. Intense efforts were made to censure his public talk. He became the centre of great publicity, and as a consequence, 10,000 came to hear him, with only 1,300 witnesses in all of Australia. While giving a talk to the brothers, he asked, "Where are all the children?" going on to explain that their place was with their families. Consequently, all the children were brought in to sit together as families. No more Sunday schools. For the preaching work, with so few brothers and such a large territory in the cities, the brothers would make up car groups and spend all day in a particular area. Door-to-door preaching, the same as we do today, but we were not as well trained as we are now. Some just used a testimony card. It explained our calling and the kingdom message with very little talking. Times they would have a mini assembly. The witness work in the area would be organised for the mornings, encouraging talks and a study of the Watchtower in the afternoon. When it was possible to have a discussion at the door, the subject was more likely to be about hell and purgatory, or perhaps immortality of the soul. The brothers would then, to prove the truth, open the King James Version of the Bible. Also at that time, people had closer ties to their churches, and some were very vocal in their rejection of the message. At that time also we made good use of gramophones. At one time there were nearly 20,000 in use worldwide. We would approach the door and invite the householder to hear a short Bible lecture by Brother Rutherford, 4-minute duration, on the value of knowledge.
How this great privilege may be enjoyed, and it behooves everyone to eagerly grasp the truth as it is revealed. God created the earth for man, and he created man to inhabit the earth. His creation is not in vain.
The society produced a more convenient model. It was much easier to use. It just needed the push of a small lever. It also had a small compartment for a Bible and books. Sound cars were also a much used method of preaching the kingdom. A large speaker on top with a transcription machine inside the car running from a battery. In the Sydney Domain, a large park adjacent to the city, a presentation was made every Sunday afternoon. There'd be a Bible lecture by Brother Rutherford, some quotes from the Consolation magazine would be read, and an intermission of music. During the music, the brothers would then present the Watchtower and Consolation magazines to the people. Sound cars were also used as part of information marches. The brothers in large groups would hold up signs or wear placards, advertising a special talk to be given. This form of publicity was very effective. In Broken Hill, a country town, the title of the talk was Advertising the Kingdom. A talk to be given at a local venue. After the march, they would follow up with a call at the homes, the door-to-door work. Sound cars and zealous publishers broadcast the kingdom message throughout cities and towns. They often met with opposition from clergy-incited mobs. In Maitland, a coal mining town, a mob encircled a sound car and began to roll it over. A policeman intervened, stuck his head in the window and said, "Boys, young Lloyd Barry and Todd Bradburn, if you value your lives, get out of here." They did. The policeman actually hung onto the side of the car and escorted them out of town. The following weekend, they were in Lismore, another country town. The information march had widely advertised the public talk, fascism or freedom. At the conclusion of the talk, a mob of cane cutters tried to start a riot. Fortunately, the police were there and they intervened and stopped it. But that was in September 1939, the very month the Second World War started. Brothers were willing and enthusiastic to advertise the possibility of world unity. In the early 30s, the society recommended street workers a good way to preach the good news. Brothers wholeheartedly presented the magazines wherever people were to be found, some having a regular location on street corners. To further the preaching work, the brothers used radio At one time, there were 4 radio stations broadcasting the Kingdom message. One of them was 2HD in Newcastle. Another was 5KA in Adelaide. News and information from the magazines, musical items, Bible lectures, dramatic biblical plays. False rumours were started during the war that they were sending messages to the enemy. This was malicious foolishness, as we were known to be strictly neutral. All this busy activity was being organised and supported by the branch office in Strathfield, Sydney. While most of the bound books and study aids were imported from New York, there was a small press which served local needs, but the production was very labour intensive. Much help was needed for preparation and distribution. As well as the Bethel family, volunteers' help when needed. In the early 1940s, opposition to the work was intensifying. In the intense patriotic atmosphere of war, the clergy of Christendom exerted pressure through politics to have the preaching work banned, and they succeeded in 1941. In 1941, the federal government issued an order that Jehovah's Witnesses were prejudicial to the prosecution of the war and an illegal organisation. As a result of that, they were told that they were not allowed to meet for study or worship. They were not allowed to print or distribute any publications to do with their worship. So the brothers moved everything to underground. They dispersed the publications to brothers' homes and to other areas. And so when the authorities came to take possession, the cupboard was bare. Some of the brothers were allowed to still live at Bethel, while others had to vacate the premises. But armed guards patrolled the property night and day. But all activity was banned, with the exception of the memorial, which was permitted in the open air of the forecourt. 5 members of the Bethel family were imprisoned for 6 months because of their neutrality. But the brothers didn't lose their joy. They put up a fine fight for their faith. 1942 saw a complete eviction within 24 hours of the Bethel family, the property taken over by the army. The Society had a new Bible aid, a book called New World. They had the book in secret storage, but how to get it out to the brothers? A Sydney brother offered to take some and distribute them to the congregations between Sydney and Adelaide, a trip of 1,600 kilometres. They travelled as a family visiting relatives in an old car with a gas producer and a heavy loaded trailer. Many of the brothers who owned cars equipped them with smelly, dirty, inefficient charcoal gas producers. They'd get you there, but not necessarily on time. But transport was essential to continue the preaching work. At the height of this persecution, the brothers in Sydney arranged a secret one-day meeting in the bush. A path was hacked through the bush, and the branch overseer, Brother McGilvray, gave an encouraging talk to stand steadfast, keep loyal, trust in Jehovah. The preaching work from door to door continued, but with caution and just the Bible. While still under ban in 1941, it was decided to have a convention, a national convention, invite the brothers from all over Australia. They didn't know whether it would be possible or not, so they just left it to Jehovah, see if his blessing was on their efforts, in defiance of government restrictions. But where could they get a venue? They decided to completely build their own. On a large piece of rural land close to the city, they erected tents, constructed temporary buildings, installed power and steam boilers for cooking, large sheltered areas for dining, built simple dining tables, and manufactured hundreds of folding chairs. Everything was completed, and the brothers began to arrive. Travel restrictions were in place because of the war, but the brothers came anyway, some by horse and carriage, by bike. Many were able to come by train. Not too many by car because of the gasoline shortage. The West Australian government refused to allow the brothers to use the trains. So, not to be stopped, they equipped their 9 cars and trucks with gas-producing units operating on charcoal. Set out to travel west to east, a distance of 4,800 kilometres, or 3,000 miles. They drove night and day, refuelling with charcoal every 80 kilometres. But they made it. A baptism for newly dedicated brothers was held in the local Casula River. A highlight of the convention was the release of the secretly published Bible aid, Children. All the children were gathered together and received their own personal copy. It was a thrilling time for the brothers. To be together in spite of the hardships of travel, the hysteria of war, Jehovah's blessing proved to be on the arrangements. The convention was a great success. The kingdom work continued to prosper, even though the authorities stepped up their harassment. They raided the brothers' homes, they took away literature whenever they possibly could, and they even took some of the prominent brothers and forcibly detained them in isolated towns and villages. The High Court of Australia, though, in 1943 made a landmark decision. They found that the ban was illegal. Secondly, that it was a violation of the Constitution. And finally, that it was a violation of the freedom of worship. Now, this was a tremendous benefit to Jehovah's Witnesses, but not only to us, but also to every citizen of Australia. The Adelaide City congregation had a Kingdom Hall which was also seized by the government. It was returned to them with compensation. They used it to refurbish the building. During the ban, all the while operating underground, the number of brothers rose from 2,500 to 4,300. In 1947, landing boats for international flights used to put down in Sydney Harbour. And in 1947, Brother Knorr, the then President, and Brother Henschel made their first of many visits to Australia. They were greeted by a very happy, excited group of brothers. They'd come to help reorganise the preaching work and help solve many of the problems in the aftermath of the war. 1969 was a milestone in the work in Australia. The 1969 International Convention in Melbourne.
We're expecting about 25,000. As a matter of fact, this one is one of 25 being held around the world this year. Conventions like this have been held before. Over in New York, in Yankee Stadium in 1963, we held a very large assembly there. And in that same location, on one occasion, there were 250,000 people in attendance. And for example, in Nuremberg, in Germany, there were 107,000 in attendance. Of course, we don't get such large attendances here in Australia.
And how big have your conventions been in the past?
In 1963, we held a convention in the Melbourne Showgrounds, in the Sheep Pavilion actually, and we had 12,000 in attendance then. But we're expecting more than double that number this year, and the Sheep Pavilion will merely serve as a cafeteria for them.
A television reporter asked Brother Knorr what could be expected at the end of this system of things.
The earth may be shaken, there may be violent movements of the earth, there could be atomic energy or something like that coming down from heaven.
The reporter then talked about the general lifestyle of Jehovah's Witnesses, but noted their attitudes to Christendom.
The clergy are a bunch of hypocrites, and Jesus called the clergy of his day whitened sepulchres, full of dead men's bones. He called them hypocrites. And the clergy today are hypocrites. A good many of your clergy today believe in evolution. They don't believe in the Genesis account. In fact, most of your clergy today believe the whole book of Genesis is nothing more than a myth.
The next question was, why our attitude to blood?
Because the Bible says that you should not take blood or eat blood. The blood must be spilled upon the ground. The life is in the blood. When God made man, he put life in the blood of man, and that's part of you. And you're not supposed to take the life of someone else and put that life in you.
In 1972, expansion of Bethel was undertaken. With 25,000 publishers, there was a growing need for literature and facilities, not only for Australia, but for Asia and the Pacific. Volunteers willingly gave of their time and help. Much of the materials used were recycled bricks and timber. Others contributed financially. The entire construction was built with volunteer labour. The Bethel home, offices and factory were expanded to 4 times the previous size. Brother Wilson, the branch overseer, was asked about the expansion in view of the end of the system.
From our point of view, the answer is this. We believe that although the end of the system is quite imminent according to the scriptures, at the same time there's a great demand for Bible education and Bible literature. And for this reason, it doesn't concern us that the end of the system, if you like to say it, could come tomorrow. While ever there's a demand for literature, while ever people are interested in the Bible, this is our program, to keep going and to keep expanding and to keep satisfying the need of those who truly desire to know God and his holy word.
In the new factory, they were putting together a new press. Supervising the installation was Brother Miller from the New York Bethel.
How many presses does the Watchtower Society have worldwide?
Well, this happens to be the 51st large rotary press that we have, and of course eventually we'll have about 13 more.
Does it take long to train the brothers in setting up the press?
Not too long, because first of all the brothers are quite receptive to training, and then Jehovah's Spirit plays a very large role in helping in their training.
For such a press as this, what is the output per hour?
The output per hour is 21,000 impressions per hour maximum.
A year later, in 1973, we had the Divine Victory International Convention at Randwick Racecourse, Sydney. Once again, brothers from all over Australia came together with visiting delegates from overseas. Brother McLean welcomed them.
After all the months of planning and all the problems, the setbacks, the saving, the worrying about the trip, at last we are here in Randwick at the racecourse for the Divine Victory Assembly of God's people. Are you glad you're here, brothers? We are guests of the invisible God whom no individual person has ever seen. It's grand to see so many persons now recognizing the importance of assembling in this way with others of like precious faith. Our purpose in assembling is to receive instruction from God through his word, through his organization, and also to consider our relationship with our Heavenly Father.
At the convention, many new dedicated brothers and sisters showed that their confidence was in Jehovah's divine victory and were baptized. One new brother explained how his faith had changed his family life.
Well, I used to avoid her as much as I could when she used to go to meetings, and whenever she had a study, I used to dash straight up to the pub. Beautiful excuse, you know. And well, that's about it.
Yeah. And your life has changed then considerably because of this.
No end. As far as the family's concerned, it's running beautiful. You know, No, well, I wouldn't say we don't have arguments, because that would be wrong, but we have just slight differences, that's all. But none of this throwing pots and pans around the kitchen, what have you.
And happiness and joy is, now that you're understanding the Bible together and studying it together?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. Good.
Beautiful.
Thanks very much.
After the program had concluded on one of the evenings, the Australian brothers entertained, especially the overseas visitors, with music and dancing which reflected the multicultural makeup of the Australian people, folk music of Australians and the migrant groups that had made their home here.
Hold it. Is this a private party or can someone else join in? Who's this? Yeah. Look, I'd like to come in and join the party. I got a few of my mates with me. How many you got? Oh, 30,000 or so. Fred, get another handful of tea in the billy, will you? We got visitors, mate. You guys got a couple of gumleys in too, Fred. Just give me the words of that song again. It sounded very complicated.
Yeah,
what was it again? Timey
Kangaroo down, sport.
Yeah.
Timey kangaroo down.
Got that.
Now, that's the easy bit. The hard bit is timey kangaroo down, sport. Timey kangaroo down. You think you can remember that?
Now, I'll tell you what we'll do. You give us a verse, and we'll try Timey kangaroo down, sport, with all that fandangle bit. And then you give us another couple of verses, and then we'll just all sort of join in together.
Yeah,
that is, if I can get all the mates to join in. Right?
Away we go. Now, come on, Fred, get your board out, mate. Get your board, Fred, come on. Come on, hurry up, mate. Come on,
Timey kangaroo down, sport. Timey kangaroo down. Timey kangaroo down, sport. Timey kangaroo
Greek, Italian, Lebanese, Spanish-speaking, many different nationalities have made their homes here in Australia and are responding to the message of the kingdom. They have come to this country with hopes of a better life and found the prospect of living eternally in his new world. Australia is very much a multicultural country, and there are many ethnic congregations. In the world, we know racial discrimination is a problem. This is not the case in Jehovah's organisation. A person's skin colour, the colour of his eyes, his language, we are one family. In 1980, preparations were underway to again expand the Society's facilities. The Strathfield Bethel was just too small, and there was no room for expansion. A new complex was to be built, 3 times greater. It was built on rural land owned by the Society, just 32 kilometres from the city of Sydney. With the foresight to see the coming expansion, there would be room to grow as it was needed. As before, the response from the brothers offering their time and skills was outstanding. At one time, the construction program included a permanent workforce of 130 volunteers. Some brothers spending 2 weeks, other groups spending 4 weeks, coming from all over Australia. Some thousands of kilometres, and all the various skills and trades working harmoniously to build a beautiful new Australian branch. Now, 20 years later, the branch and its surroundings are well established. Its landscaping is delightful. Visitors are made welcome to this house of God. During the Give God Glory convention, 15,000 visitors were able to meet some of the 300 volunteers who live and work here to promote the worldwide work of kingdom preaching.
We go back Wednesday to Fiji, actually. So we get
there's a small group going there, isn't there?
That's right. We get a few days in Fiji, which is going to be really nice.
Excellent.
We'll enjoy the brothers and sisters over there. They've invited us to a meeting, so we're going to do that.
No. Yes, and I thank you very much for the wonderful tour that you gave me. It was a life experience that we won't forget.
Oh, good. It's been an awesome weekend, hasn't it?
They saw the giant rotary press. It prints, glues and folds 18,000 full-colour magazines an hour. For greater production capacity, a larger press was installed in 2005. The new press produces 38,000 magazines per hour. The installation of this new press is part of the World Program for the increasing need of Bible education.
The inside plant.
He's an Australian and Aussie temporary, but it's probably Vietnamese to each other.
Start down below that wall.
The Australian branch is one of the 4 engineering offices that prepare plans and drawings for building operations in many parts of the world. Extensions to the Bethel home in Manila, a Bethel home in Tahiti, New Caledonia, Myanmar, India, and Africa.
By means of this program, we're able to see the effect that an earthquake would have on this building.
We have very good facilities here in Australia and a group of very talented brothers and sisters that are able to work with the local engineers and put together buildings that help to support the work in faraway countries.
It was at Warwick Farm Racecourse in Sydney in 1985 that saw the last of brothers being involved in food preparation. A new system called islandising was used, but very shortly the organisation worldwide brought to an end this arrangement of providing refreshments. It certainly taxed the brothers' time, and consequently we all now just provide our own and remove our own rubbish. Certainly a much better way. Brother Franz of the governing body was the keynote speaker. He was accompanied to the platform by Brother Wallace Baxter and Brother Merv King, 3 greatly loved old brothers who had been faithfully serving Jehovah for a total of more than 150 years.
It is a fundamental.
Brother Franz's talk was on a subject that was very close to his heart.
Scriptures that God has a name. And we agree with that statement.
he in a spirited manner presented to us the new brochure, The Divine Name That Will Endure Forever.
And so it'll be our privilege to take this brochure, The Divine Name That Will Endure Forever, in our witnessing work.
At the Give God Glory convention, 600 young and old publicly demonstrated their dedication to Jehovah by water baptism. In a world torn by conflicts, serious problems with the ecology, crime and hunger, they are saying that they put their hopes and life in the hands of Jehovah's heavenly government. The 60,000 in attendance joyously welcomed them as new brothers and sisters. The inspired psalmist said, "How good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. For there Jehovah commanded the blessing to be, and it is here in this great stadium." There is a warmth, a reaching out. A token of welcome is the exchange of gifts. Some of the brothers were able to make some small souvenirs, a very personal gesture of hospitality to take home with them from their Australian brothers.
She might come and stay for a couple of days with me.
Retake the picture, and this is that's okay. Yeah. What's your name? We're from Sydney. We love me to Sydney.
Jehovah's Witnesses are the most blessed and happiest people on earth because they know the truth. They know the truth about God and His name. As a result, they have the answers to all the important questions in life. This knowledge gives them a peace and a contentment that the world doesn't know. It gives them the strength to endure life's difficulties. It gives them the knowledge of God's love and His purpose for them. It gives them a relationship with God and ultimately a hope for the future. The world can never give that. See this great crowd here in this great stadium and to remember its small beginnings, you think of Isaiah chapter 60 verse 22. Here in Australia, the little one himself has become 1,000, and the small one a part of a mighty nation. I myself, Jehovah, will speed it up in its time.